Good morning, honorable members. Time is 10, and I will only give you to settled a minute just to be settled, all of you, so that we meeting. Thank you. Good morning, honorable members, once again. Good morning to the guests. Welcome to the leadership of Transnet, led by our Minister of Public Enterprises. This is the portfolio committee meeting of these public enterprises, and it has been a while since we have interacted with Transnet, and a lot has happened in this particular entity.
Recording in progress.
Transnet is one of the crucial entities of our nation, just like DNL, ESCOM, SAA, etc. We can also say ESCOM is our oxygen of our economy, and Transnet is the blood veins of this economy. Hence, we must jealously guard these for generations to come. Today, Transnet will give us an update on their business operation, rail concessions, and infrastructure development. Our main aim is to ensure we build state capacity, particularly in the state-owned companies, so that they to continue to advance the transformational and developmental agenda of our state, including our government. Here, we will be giving the secretary, as we normally do, to help us with the apologies, if there are any. And then we continue the session thereafter. Mr. Desang.
Morning, Chair, and
Yes.
honorable members and guests. The apologies I've received, Chairperson, is from Mr. Buthelezi is attending another committee meeting. Mr. Kwankwa is in the Chief Whips Forum, and Mr. Kachalia has informed us that he will be leaving at 12:15. Those are the three apologies, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Muchumi. Honorable members, let's, without wasting time, go to the Transnet leadership to provide us with the presentation. However, the minister, I think, will kickstart by his overview. Honorable Minister.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honourable members, and good morning to the colleagues from both the Transnet board and the executive. Chair, let me firstly say that there are two meetings that are going to clash. One is a cabinet committee meeting that starts at 10:30, at which I've got to produce or present two cabinet memos. So I'll remain logged in here and toggle between the two meetings. Secondly, the chair of the new board of Transnet, Mr. Andile Sanku, is present and leading the Transnet delegation. And as you know, we had the results for the 21-22 financial year, or rather 22-23 financial year, confirmed a few days ago, that is on Wednesday last week. And that was followed by a public announcement of the results. But it was also accompanied by a statement from ourselves in the ministry, which set out, firstly, that Transnet finds itself, as you correctly point out, in a situation where its performance is declining, and that decline in performance is impacting on the commodity sector specifically, but other sectors as well. But secondly, it's also impacting on the economy. Of course, not all of the recovery that needs to happen from the state capture period has been concluded, so that's part of the problem. But we also know that there are both internal factors and external factors impacting on Transnet's performance. Accordingly, and in terms of the memorandum of incorporation, we've asked the board to look into a number of matters as a matter of urgency. And I would like the committee to take into account that some of the issues that might be raised might be work in progress, and that in a month's time or so, we could come back and give you a better briefing once the board has had an opportunity to process some of those issues that it is currently working on. And that would then also enable the committee to get a fuller picture of what the path ahead looks like as far as Transnet is concerned. There are a number of initiatives that each of the divisions or operating areas within Transnet is involved with, and I'm sure they will share that with you in the course of the next hour or so. And the chair is going to introduce that subject matter and then hand over to the executive. So my apologies for being in and out of the meeting, but I'll remain logged in. And with your consent, Chairperson, can we hand over to the chair of the board to make his maiden speech in Parliament, so to speak. And then we leave that matter in your hands in terms of process. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Before you the chair comes in, can I ask the secretary or the person who is in charge of this Zoom session to remove the unmuting if we cannot change that name, and the Zoom user? We don't do that. There are no names like that. I think we've been saying that for a long time now. Any person who has been identified as unmuting and Zoom, you remove those people immediately so that they come back with the real names. Thank you. We can continue.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members. Minister, thank you very much for the introduction and also for setting the scene for our meeting today. We really, as Transnet and Transnet Board, welcome the opportunity to address you this morning as a portfolio committee. We think that it is something that we look forward to engage you and account, and also share with you the journey and the thinking that we are taking to turn things around at Transnet. Secondly, we welcome and embrace the spirit of cooperation and collaboration. And we see you as an institution that we embrace ourselves to cooperate and work with closely. I also want to apologize for some of our board members that have not been able to attend this session today due to prior commitments. And I'm hoping that as we work closely together, we would be able to align our diaries early on so that we can all be present and in attending these sessions in future. I want to say that as a new board, we have identified that there are many challenges that the company is facing. And therefore, it is not going to be possible to deal with all of these challenges at once. Simply because some of them have taken a while to get us to be where we at the moment. And therefore, to extricate ourselves from the present situation is something that is going to take time. But be that as it may, we do believe that there are issues that can be addressed quite successfully in the short term. In other words, over a 6-month period, 12-month period, and 18 months period. And that is really the focus and the priority that the board is giving to those issues. Whilst we are keeping, our picture in terms of the long term of the organization. And it's a careful balancing act to try and make sure that we maximize, our ability to focus on both at the same time. Having said that, we also believe that some of these challenges are within our own control. And therefore, we have a sharper focus as the board on what we believe is sort of a back to basic approach, looking at our own processes, our own operational reform and business improvements. In this regard, we are seized with developing a turnaround plan, as the minister has mentioned, which we think that we would have a sound plan that we would have been approved by the board in a month's time from now. We also have recognized that some of the challenges are completely outside our own control. And in this regard, through the Office of the Minister and yourself, honorable members, to the extent that you could assist Transnet in dealing with those issues that are outside our control. And the team will provide with a detail around those issues, simply because it is our belief that as we embrace the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, we think that if we can have all of the support to get the Transnet working again. As I end and hand over to Portia to lead the team, I want to say that the minister has been very clear in directing the board, as it was announced last week, on what he would like to see being done. The board is seized with this assignment, and we're committing ourselves to report to the minister on those issues and apprise him on the progress we are making, and so that he is in a better position to have a good understanding of what the direction of travel is as Transnet. So it's still very early stages for this board to comment quite substantively on a number of issues, but we just want to assure you of our commitment to turn the company around and our determination to find lasting solutions to the problems at hand. Honorable Chair, I'd like to pause at this stage, and with your permission, hand over to Portia Dabe, the CEO of Transnet. Thank you very much.
Honourable Chair and honourable members, Honourable Minister of Public Enterprises, Chair of the Transnet Board, and Chair of the rest of the board members of Transnet and the executive. Thank you once again, Honourable Chair, for giving us the opportunity to report back on the performance of Transnet. Chair, we've tried to stick quite strongly to your questions that you had asked us in the presentation. So the presentation is going to be made by Nonkululeko is going to open up on, just to give an update on the finances, because it's impossible to just act like Monday, Friday did not happen. So to give a brief overview of the results, and then to immediately go into the presentation on the operational areas as requested by the committee. Honourable Chair, just to get a sense, how much time will you be giving us for the presentation so that we can structure ourselves around that? Hello, was I audible? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying now it's 20 past 10. You have already utilized another 10 minutes through the minister, the chairperson, meaning that you are left now with 40 minutes.
Okay, thank you,
because last time, because I'm trying to create enough space for the members to entertain and engage the report. Otherwise, if I'm giving you beyond that time, we'll be in a very serious problem where we have to take the questions to be written down and be answered, you know.
All right.
And that,
okay,
I think, is very good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. So I'll step back and just manage the time on our side. Nkululeko, you can go ahead, please. Thank you.
Good morning to the committee, Honorable Chair of the committee, Honorable members, the board of Transnet present today, as well as the executives. Chair, I will briefly take you through just the high-level picture of the outcomes of 2023 financial year that we reported last Friday. On some of the elements that came out is that we released the results with an unmodified or unqualified opinion, as well as confirming Transnet as still a going concern, even though we are going to talk through the challenges that we are dealing with at the moment. We also highlighted, Chair, in our results that we receive support from the National Treasury to deal with the KZN floods that impacted our infrastructure quite significantly in April, which also impacted negatively the performance that is reported in this financial year with the slowdown that it caused in the movement in the KZN area. But also, Chair, we received another 2.9 in that 5.8 billion. It is in two parts. The one part was for the floods support, and the other part of 2.9 billion was to assist Transnet with the availability of the rolling stock, which is quite a matter of focus in the performance that we'll be reporting in this committee today. The fourth thing, Chair, I would like to highlight is that Transnet was dealing in the last financial year with $1 billion that had been raised 10 years ago and was maturing in the year that passed. We have successfully closed that matter in going to the international markets and raising another $1 billion that helped us to refinance that. And we were quite appreciative of the support from the international markets because our requirement was 3 times subscribed, which indicated to us that even though the global economy was facing a lot of challenges, there is still interest for the global markets to work with South Africa and Transnet. Our gearing is currently at 43.6%, and it is a gearing level that we are wanting to manage between the levels of 40 to 45%, Chair, in order to continue leveraging the balance sheet of Transnet. However, we are aware that our debt levels are high, and therefore it's quite a balance to keep a level of leveraging while trying to move your debt level as far down as manageable. We have also recovered some of our long outstanding debtors, which was also very significant for us in terms of just ensuring that we are getting paid for the services that we are rendering. We have also been focusing, Chairperson, on reducing irregular expenditure. We are not yet at zero, but we've seen significant improvement in how much irregular expenditure we've incurred this year. We are still in the exemption period that we were granted by National Treasury at 31st March 2022. It was a 3 years exemption, and we've got 1 more year that we are working with the exemption to make sure that irregular expenditure or procurement reforms are driven and we have a better compliance space in this regard. We worked very closely as well with our rating agencies, and their main focus in the year was whether we would successfully deal with the 1 billion maturity. As soon as that matter was closed, Chairperson, Moody's revised our outlook from being negative to being stable, and S&P affirmed the rating that they had given us. If I can quickly go to the next slide. On this slide, Chairperson, we just highlight the challenges that impacted the performance that we reported. The locomotives availability, and I think when the operating divisions present, they will talk in detail. It was a significant matter for us. The impact of the KZN floods, I have already mentioned, but also security challenges that impact our infrastructure and assets, with increase in theft and vandalism, which then impacts our ability to do as much as we would wish to. We also experienced a strike action, Chairperson, of about 11 days in October, where we were dealing with the salary increases, but it was closed with a 3-year agreement with our labor colleagues. We've continued to experience derailments, and we have a high level of debt that we are having to deal with, specifically in the next 5 years. In the year, Chair, we did breach one of the lender covenants, which is quite material. However, I am pleased to report that the lenders did support Transnet and waived their rights to this breach. And as such, we were able to release the results without any issue in this regard. However, as indicated, Chair, we reported a significant loss of 5.7 billion. In the next slide, very briefly, just to give you an indication of the numbers, the revenue we reported is 68.9 billion rands, which is about 0.6% up. The net operating expenses increased by 2% and were 45.9 billion. And in the context of some of the activities that we had been driving, there was a focus to manage cost as much as possible. And the 2% is driven by material and critical matters in the business, including spending on maintenance requirements, some of the electricity increases that we had to absorb, but in other areas we did see some reduction in expenditure. And as a result, we are reporting, therefore, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization that has decreased by 2.1% at 23 billion rands, Chair, which then resulted in this loss of 5.7 billion rands. The other numbers, without going into too much detail, we still invested 13.9 billion into the assets renewal, and 79% of that 13.9 billion was invested in the Transnet Freight Rail business to try and renew the infrastructure and other assets, and the rest was in other parts of the business. I've already touched on the ratios, so I'll go past that slide, Chair, in the interest of time. This is the slide that gives a sense of the performance per operating division. And when the ODs speak to their business, Chair, they will go into much detail. But just to give an indication, in the revenue that we reported in the financial statements, Transnet Freight Rail and Transnet Engineering are the two businesses that showed a reduction in the revenue. If we compare year on year, Transnet Freight Rail, a reduction of 7.9% compared to what was reported in the prior year. This is largely driven, Chair, by the fact that in the prior year, we reported volumes delivered of about 173 million tons. And in this financial year, we reported volumes of 149.5 million tons. And that is where the reduction in revenue is coming from. And then the Transnet Engineering is really a significant support of the Transnet Freight Rail business. But for the rest of other operating divisions, National Ports Authority, port terminals, the pipelines business, we did see an improvement in the revenue line. And therefore, the overall picture, Chair, that I've reported is driven by the numbers that we are reflecting here per operating division. If I go to the next slide, one last slide, Chairperson, this is just to give a sense to the committee on the work that we are doing with regard to irregular expenditure reporting in the year that, in the 3 years that we have exemption from the National Treasury. The exemption, Chairperson, requires that we continue to work on the control environment and making sure that the compliance processes are strengthened. However, it gave us an opportunity to still report irregular expenditure, not in the financial statements as a note, but in the integrated report and all the details of the work that is being done. So in the back of these numbers, there's a lot of work that is happening in our supply chain management space to implement the reforms and ensure that there are systems that will automate as much as we should. We are ensuring that the people are trained and the manuals are renewed, Chair, to align with the requirements. And where we landed in the financial year, Chair, was still irregular expenditure that was incurred in 2023 of 556 million. in comparison to the 1.1 billion that we reported in the prior year. And therefore, in the third year of the exemption, we will continue with the work to make sure that whatever is incurred is reported as accurately as possible, because that is the issue that resulted in Transnet receiving a qualified opinion for the 4 years from 2018 to 2021. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Honourable Chair. Good morning, Honourable Members. This part of the presentation, which is just 2 slides, focuses on the strategic initiatives that have been reported on. So I'll try and go through it relatively quickly. The focus is around rail reform, where there's a commitment to meet the white paper requirements of the involvement of third-party operators as from next year. So the President had put forward a requirement for us to separate the infrastructure manager or the Transnet Freight Rail Infrastructure from the operations division by October, and then by April to allow third-party access in a managed way onto the network. So that's one key strategic component. The balance of the strategic components that have been dealt with in the past year predominantly is around the private sector, drawing in the private sector into our key value chains. So this is not around a privatization of elements of Transnet. It's about bringing the private sector in to help us build volume, build value, invest in assets, and help us ensure that the value chains in the different parts of the business are delivered to the national interest. So if you look at our industrial portfolio at the top, you will see the kind of net present value that we are able to generate at present in these different areas. Agriculture, gas are small. Containers is large, and I'll talk to containers in a little. And fuel on the left-hand side is a key element of our Transnet Pipelines operating division. On the right-hand side, we have the big commodity groups, and the Minister mentioned these explicitly in his opening address. We see a big opportunity to expand these areas, but we ourselves are restricted in our ability to deliver volume by the points that were raised by the GCFO. So that is a shortage of locomotives, challenges with security, etc. Now, in all of these areas, we see an opportunity to leverage private sector involvement in the value chain by drawing in the private sector, in most instances through an SPV or a partnership type arrangement. So there's 2 examples at the bottom. In respect of the container segment value chain, what we do is we take the whole value chain. In this particular instance, we could look at the value chain from Gauteng, where we have a terminal in City Deep and we have a terminal in Kalfontein. That then traverses KZN and reaches the port of Durban, where we have 2 port terminals operated by Transnet Port Terminals. In the port terminal environment, DCT Pier 2 is the biggest of the transactions that we have implemented over this period. And we've closed out with a global terminal operator that will assist us to invest in the assets and drive up the performance of that terminal. So ensuring that that value chain is aligned much more effectively to the industrial needs of the country. We had made a commitment to draw in private sector investments in the inland container terminals originally, but that's now been expanded to what we call the Concours operating lease. And the focus there is to draw the private sector in on the basis of the complexity of operating container trains between Gauteng and Durban, and to draw them in on a lease type basis. On the right-hand side, what you see in the example of manganese is the opportunity to draw the private sector into some of the investments. And this is to expand from 13 million tons. So you can see the SPV is to expand rail capacity up to 16 million tons. So from the current 13 million tons to 16 million tons. So draw in additional capacity for 3 million tons of expansion. That will require investments in rail operations, locomotives and wagons. It will also require investments in bulk terminals. And very specifically, it will require investments in the NMET terminal, which is at the port of Coega. That terminal, we propose a joint venture development, and that is at an advanced stage of being developed. If I can go to the next slide, please. I don't want to spend too much time because of our commitment to close the presentation in as short a time as possible. This just indicates from 1 to 10 the key projects that we have committed to as part of the development of the strategic involvement of the private sector in our business. Richards Bay Dry Bulk Terminal is at the top, and you can see where that lies in respect of the map. And you can also see where we talk about our key segments. So you will see chrome and magnetite, energy, agriculture, coal, iron ore, manganese, and where these lie geographically on a map of South Africa. The second element is the LNG terminal at Richards Bay, which is also at an advanced stage. The RFP has been issued. We should be able to conclude negotiations with that in that respect very shortly. The Port of Richards Bay Container Terminal, for a smaller container terminal at this port. DCT Pier 2 has concluded already. We think this is a very big structural initiative. Coega Container Terminal has been delayed by the fact that we have not received a viable offer to our original PSP. We will reconclude on the basis of an adjusted request to market. The container corridor operating lease is now in the shortlisted RFI stage. The wagon sale process in respect of wagons on the iron ore line, that's from Sishen to Saldanha, we hope to conclude relatively soon. The Boegoebaai Port and Rail Development RFQ evaluation was completed by April, and some qualifying bidders were identified. The 16 million ton manganese export terminal that I spoke about on the previous slide, the funding model is being finalized, and we're now exploring the collaborations with customers in terms of the funding of that particular terminal. The last one, rail capacity expansion to 16 million tons, I've spoken about. I won't repeat that, but number 9 is really reflected on the previous slide. And then Project Ukuvuselela is the focus on being able to deliver enhanced export of automotive OEMs from Gauteng, principally from the Waltloo plant of Ford, but also from other OEMs that are located in Tshwane, down to the port of PE in Gqeberha. And the focus there is to expand the infrastructure, and the EPC contract has already been delivered to market and will close at the end of September. Let me leave it there. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair. My name is Pepe Silinga. And can I confirm that I'm audible, Chair? Can I confirm that I'm audible, Chair?
We can
You are
hear.
audible.
You are audible. Proceed.
Yes. I'm in charge of the Transnet National Port Authority. The first part, Chair, that I want to speak to is the marine services. And marine services, Chair, is really when once the vessel is outside the breakwater, from the time that we receive a request to service that vessel, meaning to bring it in, to the time that we actually drop a pilot onto that vessel to navigate inside the port. And there's been a positive movement on all of those particular container terminals. And those particular numbers, Chair, they come in the previous period, 21-22. The actual for Durban was 7.53 hours, and for Ngqura was 12.56, and for Cape Town was 11.97. And you can see the targets were very aggressive, and for all of them, there has been a positive development. Insofar as the ship turnaround time, and the ship turnaround time is when the vessel, upon it being brought into the port, when it passes the breakwater coming in, as well as when it actually goes out, when it gets out of the port. We call that a ship turnaround time. Now, there are two roles. There's a role of the Port Authority, and that role covers up to a point of getting the last rope tied, and then the terminal operator works on that particular vessel, and as soon as a notification of completion of working on the vessel, again, the Port Authority takes over. So insofar as the role of the terminal operators, they basically contribute of the total value chain from a time point of view, they contribute about 93% of the time. So going forward, one of the things that's going to happen, Chair, we're breaking this down so that we can only isolate the performance and reflect on the performance, both of the system as a whole, but also on the performance of the terminal operators. And you'll see, Chair, that the acute problems in particular are with the port of Durban, Pier 1 and Pier 2, as well as the port of Cape Town, performance of 75 against 55 for Pier 1 and 93 hours against 53 hours, and Cape Town in particular, notably performing at 73 hours instead of 50 hours. If we could move to the next slide. And insofar as the fleet, there are a number of detailed due diligence that have been undertaken, Chair, to identify the root causes and address those particular problems. And there's significant progress that has been made, but we have not captured that because we're reporting on the financial year 22-23. But here, Chair, we're simply reflecting the fleet requirements to operate the port and what is currently available. And there's a very detailed plan, if you look at the bottom of the slide, Chair, a detailed plan of the maintenance interventions to return some of the fleet, which over a period of time has actually been broken down, and instituting of a proactive or planned maintenance program to ensure that we maintain particular levels of availability of that particular fleet, including a dashboard which would reflect on a day-to-day basis which fleet is available, so that the interventions are timeous and also proactive. Next slide, please. And in this particular slide, Chair, we're reflecting, number one, on CAPEX. One of the interventions, Chair, that insofar as CAPEX is concerned, critical interventions would have been under CAPEX, the acquisition of generators for business continuity for the port of Richards Bay and the port of Saldanha. So a significant part of that under expenditure was occasioned by delays in concluding that particular transaction and recognizing that particular CAPEX. However, it has since been concluded, and those diesel engines are on site, currently being connected. We were also at the time struggling with some of the barriers that were occasioned by prescriptions on local content, amongst other issues, where there were non-awards because the bidders at the acceptable levels of pricing, in fact, did not demonstrate sufficient content level, and those particular issues have since been resolved. Insofar as the real estate revenue is concerned, we've been focusing on increasing non-tariff revenue so as to reduce the overall cost of doing business, and there's a positive variance in that particular regard. And lastly, this one was reduction of monies that are owed to us. So we had a target of 572, and we're able to exceed that target, and we now have about 518 million rand that is still owed to us. Hence, notwithstanding the fact that it's a lower number, but it actually shows a positive trajectory. Next slide, please. There are a number of projects, and I'm not going to mention all of them, that we've actually been working on. And I'll just highlight, Chair, number one, which is the LNG terminal in Richards Bay, which is a significant project for the development of infrastructure to also exploit the industrial complex that's existing in there and diversify the energy base as well. And that particular project, we are hoping that construction will be completed by 2026. And there's two elements: a portion that will be done by the private bidders, and a portion that's going to be done as part of the common user infrastructure. And there's been submission of the port development framework plans, which were last submitted and updated about 4 years or so ago. and that went through it's a post-financial year event, but nevertheless a significant one, as well as approvals of the port master plans by the port consultative committees, as well as the National Consultative Committee. And if at the second from the bottom, we can just, or third from the bottom, the RFP that was advertised for the container handling facility for the port of Richards Bay. Perhaps I'm remiss in skipping the point container terminal and the work that has been done there to increase that particular capacity. And this is one of the projects that we believe is moving relatively very well and is being fast-tracked. And the port of Bukubai, which is in the West Coast, is a proposed port, and a shortlisting was concluded. We've reverted back to the shortlisted entities and advised them, and we are in the process of finalizing the RFP so that we can go out. And this would be for the development of both a new port, a deep water harbor, plus a rail that links from a source of raw material right up to the port as well, a significant project in the quantums of tens of billions of rands. The next slide. And the same, some of the projects that we're doing would be your transversal type of projects, which are enablers to ensure sustainability of the ports, and those would be in relation to utilities. And you'll see at the bottom, we've got a water desalination projects, which are transversal across the ports, but as well as renewable energy projects, whether they are of solar nature or gas projects, but all of these are being done across the port system to complement the efforts and the role of the municipalities insofar as providing utilities, but also to ensure a just in case, so that we're able to ensure business continuity. Next slide. And thank you very much.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. My name is Jabum Dagi. I'm the Chief Executive of TPT. I'll take you through the TPT business for the past financial year. We did, as the volumes are indicated on the containers, we saw a slight reduction in the volumes, as it can be indicated in the graph. The months of April and October, where we impacted in April by the floods and in October by the strike that took about 2 weeks. On the automotive sector, we did quite well. We saw a huge growth in volumes, and we also were able to capitalize, especially in Durban, both on the imports and as well as the exports of the vehicles. We operate that in East London as well as PE. In the bulk sector, we did not do a fair that well. The volumes were slightly down. We are dependent on both the road as well as the rail for the volumes that we are able to handle there. So that will also factor in. The break bulk, we did quite well. It grew about 24% from the budgeted revenues. Next slide. If we look at the KPIs, starting with the container sector, we're not able to achieve most of the KPIs, especially the ship working hour. But if you starting from the top, in Pier 1, there was a slight improvement from the previous year. Pier 2, we saw a reduction, as well as the Pier CTCT. NCT saw a slight improvement, although we were slightly short of achieving the target, as well as PECT, we saw the improvement. The Pier 1, Pier 2, as well as CTCT were largely impacted by the equipment that is aging. I'll be talking later to the plans that we are putting in place to correct the situation. In the bulk sector, starting with the iron ore, the KPIs there, we were able to achieve their loading rates or exceed it. We did quite well. The manganese is slightly low, but close to the target. The magnetite in Richards Bay, we did quite well. Chrome was slightly below, and coal as well was slightly below. In the break bulk, we were able to achieve all the KPIs except for ferrochrome, that was slightly below. The automotive sector, as I've indicated, is where we are able to saw a huge improvement. The effect of the operating model that we have introduced has helped us to with the efficiencies as well as also with the throughput. Where in Durban, for example, you have a terminal with a capacity of 520,000 units, and we're able to achieve in the past year 620,000 units, 100,000 more units than the capacity of that terminal. Next slide, please. If we look at the most of the challenges that we experienced, weather played a large part. We're just indicating the impact of weather in our operations. Areas that were impacted the most, Cape Town as well as NCT in PE. That is when we experienced the effects of the bad weather. Unfortunately, the city also coincides with the time with the peak export season of the table grape. So that normally has a huge impact. That also then is impacting the type of equipment that we are operating, something that we are addressing at the moment in terms of equipment availability so that we can recover more quicker. And next slide, please. When it comes to equipment, these are some of the initiatives that we are implementing. We started embarking on the long-term OEM collaboration early this year. We are concluding that now. We are signing up with the major OEM of the equipment so that we can have the security of supply for the major equipment, like your ship-to-shore cranes that you use to offload and load containers on the vessels. The RTGs or rubber-tired gantries that we use on the land side to move the containers, the struggle machines that is also used on the land side, all these major equipment, we are concluding a fixed collaboration contracts for the next 10 years for the supply of this so that we can standardize on the type of equipment that we're using in the container terminals. We can have the OEMs that we sign up with to develop a proper technical support in South Africa so that they can be able to support us and also have a proper consignment stock to have the space available for us to maintain the equipment. This is coming into effect in the next coming days and weeks when we will be then concluding the contracts to order new equipment with them. We are also concluding this contract for the supply of the space with the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, as well as the OPMs, original parts manufacturers, so that they can be able to support the existing equipment, both for the spares as well as the services, that we can be able to have an existing contract that we can tap into to support the equipment. We are also utilizing our sister company, Transnet Engineering, for the fabrication as well as the refurbishment, getting them to get more share of the work that is happening within the ports and in terms of fabrication as well as the refurbishment of the equipment. There is other enhancements that we're busy with, especially on the SEP, to ensure that the catalogs of the equipment and the space that we have are reflected in the SEP systems to expedite the procurement of those space. Thank you. Next slide. This is just talking to the replacement plans in terms of the equipment that we are implementing. And next slide. It's the continuation of that, but on the bulk side. Next slide, please. We are also then just indicating what are the major refurbishments that we are busy with when it comes to the equipment. It's both the procurement of the new equipment as well as the refurbishments that we're going to be executing in the next few months, as well as planning ahead. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable members, Minister, and the board chair and the board members on the call. Could I equally confirm that you can hear me, that I'm audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, Chair, what we did is on the TFR side, which is the business that is the one that is seriously impacting on the negative performance of Transnet, is that we have done a review of the last, 12 years to clearly understand, exactly what the issues are that we need to actually focus our attention on in attempting to turn this business, around. So you would see that when we show how, the revenue and volumes have been tracking over the last, 12 years or so, that the revenue has actually been declining over the years as a result of the decline in volumes. And those decline in volumes is also directly linked to the declining numbers of rolling stock. And what we mean by rolling stock is the locomotives and wagons combined. In the years, in some years when we have actually shown some revenue growth, you will see that, a lot of it was as a result of tariff increases and an improvement in the product mix, as opposed to an actual improvement in volume movement. And as we do this, though, the net operating expenses have been increasing, over the years, and you would see that just for the last 12 years, the operating expenses have more or less, doubled. But what is also key to note is that the capital investment has equally been declining over the last 12 years. And the important bit for this is that it actually speaks directly to what we've been able to invest back into the infrastructure to ensure that it remains in a state where it runs, effectively. And we then lastly, just indicate that if you look at the last 2 years, or the years where we actually delivered the highest volumes, and you compare what level of capex was actually spent on the infrastructure over those years, you would see that the capex spend was in the region of about 20 billion. And where we sit today is that we are probably at half of that capex expenditure. Next slide, please. Equally, Chair, having heard that Transnet Trade Rail actually accounts for 47, or at least in 21-22, it accounted for 47% of Transnet's revenue. In this last financial year, it dropped, and it now accounts for 43% of the revenue that is generated by Transnet. What we wanted to show on this slide is that because we are located along what we call operating corridors, it's also important to reflect that the performance of the corridors is not the same. So if we look at the corridors, such as the North Corridor and the Northeast Corridor, that account for 52% of our volumes and our revenue. Those are the two corridors where we've experienced the greatest decline in respect of volumes. And that actually speaks largely to the specialized, locomotives that are required to be able to operate on those corridors. It's equally been important for us to ensure that we locate ourselves in the corridors and understand the unique challenges of each of the corridors, because the responses to the challenges will be different going forward. And in looking at other corridors, such as the Ore Corridor, where mainly we need to focus on improving the infrastructure, as opposed to really seeing a challenge of availability of locomotives. In the case of the container corridor, I think Andrew in his presentation would already have mentioned that. We know that there, I mean, we've just had an increase in cost issue that we need to actually solve for going forward. But in looking, and I won't repeat the issues that have already been highlighted, that overall performance is impacted by locomotives, infrastructure, and security. But what I wanted to highlight here is that we acknowledge as well that there is a lot of work that needs to be done internally in making sure that we actually improve our turnaround times and in so doing, improve efficiencies within our environment. And what we've, equally have to deal with is that we are currently highly dependent on manually driven operations throughout the value chain. And that's got to be a key area of focus for us as we look, to improve efficiencies that we do have direct control over. The next slide, please. Again, Chair, here, I will not go through this slide, but it was really just to give a little bit more flavor in terms of putting forward numbers to everything that has already been shared by the first two colleagues who actually spoke in relation to the impact of the locomotives, the impact of the infrastructure, and the impact of security and the manually driven systems. I thought it was equally important, Chair, just to reflect that if we look at the last year, just to give a sense as well as to some of the things that would have impacted last year's performance in particular, that we lost in the region of about 7 million tons and the equivalent of about 1.7 billion as a result of security incidents. The strike, would have cost us about 6 million tons, and the floods about 3 million tons with a corresponding cost. But what remains the biggest driver of the continuous decline of performance is the unavailability of locomotives, where in the last year, the opportunity lost, to move more was the equivalent of 24.3 million tons. Next slide, please. And here, this is why then, we go into just a little bit more detail to actually show that as we have more and more locomotives that need to be parked, it directly actually impacts on what we're able to deliver. And you'll see that the graph has been growing over the years. So we call them long-standing locomotives, and the definition of long-standing locos is if a locomotive has been parked for more than 50 days because it does not have the space in order to be repaired, it then falls into the category of what we call long-standing locomotives. And you will see that over the years, the number of long-standing locomotives has been growing. And this is a combination of all of the locomotives that we have, which is the Chinese locomotives, the WebTech locomotives, and the Alstom locomotives. And it's not as if internally we're not looking to try and resolve the issue because TE, our sister company, had also started a project to try and bring back some of these long-standing locos. But unfortunately, as a result of some of the challenges that they faced in respect of procurement, DTIC localization challenges, and some of the constraints or the lack of support, from the OEMs, by the end of 2023, we'd only been able to return about 61 of those locos. But equally, we always have to find ourselves prioritizing and reprioritizing. And that's what also has led to the fact that we have not been able to bring back the other long-standing locomotives as anticipated up until now. If we move to the next slide, we then reflect the CRR3 locomotives, quite specifically, and you see that once again here, it is, a growing, trend that when we started the year in 2023, we had 132 long-standing of these locomotives. By the time we end the year, we have 180 locomotives that were already standing parked. And these, if you will recall, Chair and the committee, are our newest locomotives largely, which are between 5 to 7 years, and they are standing parked at this point in time. As of today, because the number continues to grow, we have 202 of these locomotives that are standing parked. And these are the locomotives that had been brought into the system specifically to be able to assist us to move cargo on the North Corridor, where we're moving mostly export coal and export chrome. So when we park more of these locomotives, it has a direct impact on what we are able to move on the export coal line and the chrome lines as well. If I just give a sense of what it means when we say that 202 locomotives are standing parked as of today, that could equate, to 50 additional trains that we could be running for both export coal and for chrome today, which we're unable to do as a result of our inability to be able to bring in the spare parts at this point in time. But what are we then doing, to try and resolve the problem? Next slide, please. Is that we have started, to return some of the long-standing locals, especially from the other OEMs, such as WebTech, and we have approached the OEMs, directly to actually assist us to try and bring back the long-standing locals with some level of speed. And we have been able, to actually conclude our negotiations with Alstom. And as of end of this week, we will be finalizing the negotiations and the revised agreements for the return of the long-standing locals with WebTech. And then we've also had to confine some of the locomotives that operate on the O line to Alstom, because the original OEM, such as Mitsui, failed to respond to our tender. And that tender is ongoing now, where we've confined it to Alstom, and we're looking to close on that so that, again, we have a faster process to try and bring back some of the long-standing locals. As you would be aware, Chair, the CRRC negotiations remain in progress, and I'll leave that to the GCE to speak more about those ones. But for the ones where we equally, just to demonstrate some of the ones that where we've been able, or the number of locomotives that we've been able to bring to date, is that we've started to work on some of the diesel locomotives. And on this slide, it reflects that we had already brought back some 5 of the D45s, but as of today, we've brought back a total of 7 of the D45s, and they've equally allowed us to be able to initiate a new service or new manganese service to East London, as well, which is a completely new service that we did not have in the previous year. But we then continue to work, with our sister company, TE, in also looking to see how we can jointly work to improve the reliability of the locomotives that we have in the system today. And in the third bucket, we are now beginning to also negotiate directly with the OEMs to enter into what we call an MRSA contract, where the OEMs would have an obligation to keep a certain amount of space in the country so that they can ensure that we have an improved reliability of our fleet. And those negotiations are nearing finalization for a number of the OEMs. And next slide, please. Chair, again, I won't speak to this one because I've already shared, but this is a slide that just gives the detail of how much we actually lose through the security incidents in terms of the amount of cable depth or the length of cable that is actually stolen, but also just the revenue impact of those security incidents. So when we look to see where most of these incidents actually occur, the number of incidents mostly occur on the container corridor, but the volume impact is much greater on the North Corridor, which is where we move the export coal line. So 77% of the volume impact is of security incidents are felt on the North Corridor, as opposed to the other corridors at this point in time. If I could move to the next slide. Then this is really just talking about what are we doing to try and resolve the issue of security. It is not something that we can solve on our own, and we have made that statement several times, but equally there are initiatives that we've been undertaking in the system to begin to deal with this issue in a much more comprehensive way. And we have gone out, to bring in service providers that are not just going to provide us with the usual way of guarding the line, where it would just be warm bodies on the line. But we have gone out to say we want to work, with the service providers, that they also equally assist us in making sure that they bring in the technology, they bring in early detection technologies, as well. But most importantly, that they begin to work a lot more with the communities in order to make sure that we can improve our intelligence on the ground and be able to respond a lot more effectively to the security issues that we face on all of our corridors that have such a significant negative impact on our performance. Next slide. And then internally, I spoke, in upfront that we have issues in relation to our manual systems. So we have actually moved with speed to ensure that we bring in a tool which we'll call an integrated train planning tool. And this is a tool that would assist us to be able to plan better, replan when we actually have operational challenges, and therefore be able to respond a lot more quicker, going forward. And this was really just a slide that shows that a key focus for us going forward is to begin to digitize our environment and make sure that we are streamlining and simplifying our processes in order to be able to respond a lot more quicker to what we experience in the current operating environment, which is a big change from the way in which, under which we were operating 10 years ago. On the next slide, we then show, Chair, what would be the benefits of actually transforming the TFR value chain into a digitized, enabled business by bringing in, partners to actually assist us, to do that. I've already spoken about the train planning and scheduling side, but the intention of this is not that it just solves one area, but it solves the complete value chain, because it also helps us to be able to improve on our train execution, where upfront we can determine how much needs to be done in terms of the maintenance on the line, and therefore help us to make sure that we use our limited funds a lot more effectively, for going forward. The second issue is that it would also help us to begin to track our trains a lot more better. We've seen technology from around the world where even on maintenance, if you can upfront before a train arrives at its final destination, have determined exactly what maintenance needs to be undertaken on that locomotive, you are able to turn it around a lot more quicker. And those are the type of technologies that we would like to benefit on as we drive the digitization of TFR, going forward. It also talks about the improvement of safety, where currently we have a significant number of derailments, and most of those are as a result of rail breaks on the infrastructure. And because we have the limited funds, we don't have the ability to completely replace, the rails. But with technology, what we would be able to do going into the future is that we can predict a lot more sooner and upfront when we're going to have a rail break, and then make sure that we replace in that space. Lastly, but also equally important, is also to make sure that we improve our collection of our revenue, our full collection of whatever we are due as TFR. And this talks to, even how we load, the wagons, where if you don't have the right technology, what we bill for ends up being possibly less than what we should be obtaining as TFR. So this is really what we see as the benefits for going forward if we focus on transforming the TFR environment. The next slide, we talk in more detail about what we intend to do in each of the areas. In the rail network area, but we equally realize that we cannot do all of this without focusing on our people. And we're saying that we also need to make sure that we address issues of improving morale and productivity of our people, and also making sure that they're a lot more engaged in everything that we're doing in the space in order for us to make sure that there is alignment in what is being proposed and with a great understanding from our people. But this really just shows, the fix and the optimize and how we actually intend to grow, in the space. But I've already spoken about, all of this geared towards ensuring that we are actually improving the volume performance, while improving operational safety, and equally, hopefully, improving the customer collaboration as we do all of this, because we cannot do it on our own. And I think that Andrew has spoken at length in respect of this. The next slide, Chair, just gives an update on where we are on the container corridor operating lease. I think Andrew also talked about this in a lot more detail, but this was really just an update slide to indicate that we have completed the RFQ process. We have closed out on the evaluations, and we are now just going through the governance processes in terms of taking this through to the FIC, which is our investment committee, and through to board. And that once that is approved, we will then enter the phase 2 process of this, which is then the RFP. And we hope to do that by no later than November of this year. The last slide, Chair, also just gives an equal update on what Andrew has already spoke about in terms of where we are with the creation of the infrastructure manager. And it just shows, the work that has already been achieved, to date. And just to indicate that we are on track, that come the 1st of October, there would be the establishment of the infrastructure manager, and that we have concluded some of the pieces of work that needed to be done in order to get us there, which really spoke to ensuring that we were separating the accounts. We had also undertaken global benchmarks to make sure that what we do is more or less in line with the lessons learned from other countries as well. And the intention is that come April of 2024, we would then be able to also then proceed with the second phase of the third-party access. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I'm experiencing a serious problem. I don't know whether time is not such an important thing to Transnet, because now we are exceeded that 40 minutes with almost 17, 18 minutes now. Can you please conclude? Group CEO?
Chair, Honorable Chair, can I just, it's not that we don't understand time and it's not important to us. The problem is Transnet is big and is the number of divisions that we were going through. And it's the detail that gets you to put an explanation. Can I ask that we have 10 minutes to close, Chair, Honorable Chair?
Hope it will be that 10 minutes this time.
Okay,
Go
thank
ahead.
you very much, Chair. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Rolf Mills from Transnet Engineering. I think in order to speed things up, let's just go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is an upside downside picture of what happened to Transnet Engineering during the last year. Like Nonku said, our fortunes are very closely tied to that of TFR. And one of the things that we that under a new operating model, reduce the reliance on TFR going ahead. So I think highlights from the past year, we were hit very hard by the floods in Durban. Our plant was completely under mud and water. We lost 2 of our depots as well, which we had to literally dig out again. And that set us back quite a bit. And the other lowlight, if I can call it that, was the challenge of getting materials to the floor. And I don't say it's just a procurement problem, it's the whole supply chain from demand planning through. So we're working on both aspects very tightly, both on internal processes, and we've had a number of substantial meetings with Treasury and DTIC and DPE, where we're looking at how we can address the challenges around procurement. I think on the upside, we closed, it's been our best year in several years in terms of cross-border work. We closed 849 million rands worth of contracts in 8 different countries. Again, the challenge is actually executing that work to invoice it because of material shortages on the floor. Next slide, please. This just shows you a cost breakdown of Transnet Engineering as a business, and it reflects some of the challenges we have in that our salary bill is by far the largest part of our cost structure. The implication is that we have too little revenue to support the people that we currently have on staff, and the plan and the turnaround plan will look at addressing these issues. Next, please. So as part one of the initiatives in the past year, we were tasked to look at setting up a leasing company for Transnet. We will be the effecting partner. This will effectively be the Avis of rail or rolling stock, where third-party operators will be able to lease rolling stock from us. And the spin-off for TE is that we'll be refurbishing a number of locomotives and wagons to be able to do that. And I think if you look at the overall initiative by government to open to third-party access, this is a key enabler that will assist that process, because people won't have money in the short term to invest heavily in rolling stock. It's extremely expensive, high capital costs. So this is progressing well, and we hope to make an announcement in this regard quite soon. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle, sorry, I'll step in, and between you and so Chair, we would leave two operating divisions unpresented, and that's the Transnet Pipelines as well as Transnet Properties. So if I summarize the priorities in the period moving forward, Chair, will focus on a move from manual systems towards a lot more digital and automation of our systems in Transnet. This is starting to gain traction. For the first time in 15 years, we are now in a position where we own, when we've gotten back the ownership of our assets, our IT assets, and the management of the entire IT environment. Very soon, we will be completing the shifting of connectivity from what was previously Neotel and Liquid Telkom towards a new service provider with greater control by ourselves. Now, what that means is that the platform or the operating environment, which creates the possibility for us to automate and digitize, will finally be directly within our contract. And this means that we would, the fast track next week, the tender for the automation of procurement closes on the 13th, and we've got permission from Treasury to go for full automation of procurement from demand to fulfillment, which has been long overdue on our side. We already, as you may know, have an e-lodging system, which has really helped to clean in that area and the availability of information. I think Caesar's also just made the presentation that the long overdue integrated planning system, we've appointed a service provider that started the rollout that replaces 11 systems, including the much spoken about Plato. The rail operations and management system, which will help with identifying the rolling stock, its state and its condition, that's already in implementation, and that replaces 20 old systems. And then there's a commercial system which we've just piloted, and we've started the procurement of that, especially crucial for slot sales, and that it replaces 8 systems. Why I'm raising the point of the systems that it replaces, it starts to show the number of some of the reasons why when we look for information in Transnet, you have to look from one system. There's a lot of manual manipulation to arrive at the final number, which in part explains some of the challenges that we had around 1 or 2 of the performance indicators in this audit. Other digital projects, we have the Chief Digital Officer working with the Chief Audit Executive, Internal Auditor, to make sure that we prioritize the internal control environment, which needs to be prioritized for automation so that we can start getting much better audit reports. You've already, both Jabu and Caesar have indicated the maintenance repair reliability and spares agreements that we're entering into, both on the port side as well as on the rail side, to increase reliability. In the case of Transnet Port Terminals, we are soon going to be closing on a procurement of new port equipment, also long anticipated. In the case of TFR, Caesar's already indicated that we've got the return to service of long-standing locals. Now, I may remind committee members, Honourable Chair, that one of the biggest constraints in us moving fast on this was actually linked to Instruction Note 3 of 2021-22, which basically indicates that 8.4, which says that you can't start a procurement event until all of the budget is available. Much arguing, and to be honest, NLCC probably helped. We were able to get to a point where there's agreement that, especially in situations where we can raise the money either in the market or look at other options for funding the infrastructure, but most importantly, when a procurement has got a very long period, like a material reliability agreement, which is 7-10 years, we budget on a 5-year cycle. So you can show the money for 5 years. You won't be able to show it for 10 years, but you know that you earn the money as you're operating. Finally, on the 18th of August, we got permission to go ahead. So that means that we are now finally in the position that we're able to close on these ones. Just to close off on the return to service locals, our anticipation is that by the end of this financial year, which is March 2024, we should have 70 locals. Now, we've included the CRRC locals. I'll give you an update on where we're at with negotiating with them. And in the following year, we should be at 237 of those long-standing locals back. By then, having dealt with the backlog, because we will now finally have the parts and the spares available. Most importantly, in South Africa, the long lead items, which we often have to wait for, and secondly, the expensive items, which will be carried by the balance sheet of the OEM, and we pay for it only when we use it, and therefore when we are able to earn revenue. On the CRRC matter, Honourable Chair, just to give a sense of an update, we're pretty far. We're nearly there with SARS. Yesterday in Scopa, there was a lot of issues around words. Just to say that we are, by and large, really, it's the small administrative issues that we're closing off with SARS. The big thing that we are now waiting for is the submission by the authorized dealer of their application to the Reserve Bank, so that on the two companies that CRRC has in South Africa, they can have all restrictions lifted. The most important restriction to be lifted is the one that relates to the forfeiture of their cash. As soon as that one's lifted, SARS is ready to make the payments into their account. The issue of the maintenance of infrastructure comes up now and again, and I think Caesar has also raised it as well. The real issue with the backlog is that this continues to increase the risk of derailment. This doesn't pose a risk to the life and limb of our people, first of all. It also damages two sets of properties, both the rolling stock as well as the track, increases the cost of the system. And so the one way in which we deal with the state of the infrastructure at present is we have speed restrictions. What do the speed restrictions do? They eat up the capacity that we have available. Just to let the committee know, we have 2 independent studies which have started. In fact, one has already started by consultants, that's on Decision Cell down the line, to review the extent of the operations and the state of the infrastructure. On the North Core, which is the one that carries coal, that study is closed, and we should be appointing a service provider soon. The industry has asked to participate in the adjudication, and we've been quite comfortable with them joining that, so that that becomes also another independent. And for the rest of the system, we have our own technical team that will be doing assessment. Now, this is crucial because it gives us a baseline of the state of the infrastructure, number one. Number two, also gives us a sense of what we prioritize as we fix. It's one of the reasons, honourable members, that we are very supportive of the Transport Economic Regulatory Bill, in that it enables for the first time that we would get full cost recovery tariffs for rail. The bill has some issues that we need to deal with regards to the impact it has on TNPA, but just for now, honourable members, in as far as TFR is concerned, it's helpful. Just customers, everyone I think has indicated, very important, we're engaging regularly with them, understand irritations when it comes to the mining industry where we're not being able to supply enough trains. but I think those that we talk to on a regular basis, which is most of the users, understand that we are seized with trying to find a solution for the locals. And thankfully and gratefully, actually, many of them actually do come up and provide direct support in as far as that's concerned. Security incidents, they've been raised as well. The number that we face in the last year is 3,800. In the previous year, there were 5,000. So the partnership with industry is paying off. The problem is the impact remains as real as it ever was. The partnership with customers as well as the law enforcement agencies is absolutely crucial, that we are able to reduce this scourge. It cannot be dealt with by Transnet on its own. As you would know, last year we spent 1.7 billion on security alone. We anticipate to having a passing parade for peace officers, 800 peace officers by the end of this financial year, because there are processes we need to get approval and need to get the Commissioner of Police on side. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, none of this we are able to deliver the changes and the work that we're doing without recognizing our people. It's a very stressful time for everybody who works in Transnet. You can imagine it's not easy to wake up every day as a person in your house and you have only got negative stories about the company where you work. So there's level of stress that people are in. So it is absolutely crucial that not only do we carry them along, that we have regular and constant engagements with our union partners, but that actually we ensure that these changes are made as fast as possible so that the trauma of the change is minimized on our people. Honourable Member, I think I will stop here, and we won't make the presentation on the Academy, but Honourable Members, we are happy to take all questions. Again, really sorry, but Transnet is the size that it is, Honourable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the CEO of Transnet and the team. Thank you to the Minister and the Deputy Minister. But I think we need to stress that Transnet need to try to improve in their planning for their presentation here. We don't have 2 hours of presentation. I think they have to try by all means. Normally, portfolio committees are followed by the sitting of Parliament. Therefore, we don't have all the time to listen to presentation and not engage that presentation. Our role is to play an oversight. I've been experiencing a lot of pressure from the members while this presentation was going on and on and on. Members really want to engage the presentation. I will start without wasting time with the first person, who is the Honourable Dlamini, followed by Honourable Kachalia and the Honourable Mhlongo accordingly. Let's start with Honourable Dlamini.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, colleagues and officials from Transnet. Chair, I don't know. This report we are receiving doesn't sound too different from other reports we've been receiving for the past 3-4 years. In that it largely highlights problems, but offers little in terms of solutions. It doesn't brief us on the progress made on the previous suggestions to the same problems they are still raising. We are becoming more of a therapy session where we meet, they lament, we pat them on their back, they leave. And there's really no change that is visible on these things. That's one. 2, Chair. I am interested to find out what is the board's mandate. What are they supposed to deliver? as they start their term of office. I heard in the presentation towards the end, I'm not too sure if I didn't understand correctly, that the issues with CRRC are getting resolved and they're at a final stage of being resolved to a point where some money will be paid out to their account. This is confusing, Chair. Remember, when we went on oversight in the Port of Durban, the issue there at that time was that the China North Rail didn't really deliver anything usable. And we did point out that we want to perhaps recover those costs. Now I'm not getting a sense that the China North issue is getting resolved, but there's going to be money flowing from our country to China. I don't get that part. I need maybe a bit of clarity on that part. The other issue, Chair, we are told now that the rating agencies have had a change of heart in terms of their outlook. What are the factors that they took into consideration in arriving at that decision? Because we seem to be saying for every problem that Transnet has, the private sector will come up with a solution. Well, what is Transnet doing as an entity to try and solve these problems? Because looking at TFR, I'm a bit concerned, Chair. If TFR is going to follow the same route as SA Express, we don't have SA Express anymore, Chair, as we all know. But TFR is supposed to be sort of a cornerstone of any Transnet, as they've just pointed out in the report that TFR contributes upwards of 45% under normal circumstances of the revenue Transnet. So it then tells you that this is one division that's important insofar as making sure that Transnet is sustainable and is profitable. But it's not. The issue will be locomotives and whatnot. How far are we with resolving those 1064 locomotive issues? I understand now money is going to be flying out, but we still don't have locomotives. And the number of locomotives on that are not moving seems to be increasing. TE, for instance, is an engineering division of Transnet. At some point, we must consider reverse engineering some of these components so that our priorities remain the efficiencies in the ports, so that we are able to continue working and not have a situation where we say, no, there's a breakdowns and we have to wait for an undeterminable number of days to get these things sorted because OEMs don't have stock, they still have to ship and whatnot. So by and large, Chair, are we doing enough to deal with the issues at Transnet, or we are now married to allowing the private sector to take over and turn things around? And remember, the private sector will turn things around for their bank accounts, not for Transnet. That must be borne in mind. Chair, if you remember when we went to the port of Durban, and when we were in Cape Town as well, we were told about the port master plan. But if you look at what is being presented now and what is happening now, and what was presented as part of the port master plan, these two things don't talk to each other. Remember, in the port master plan, the plan, what we were told at the time was that manganese, chrome is going to be at the port of Saldanha, Port of Cape Town will deal with bulk and whatnot. Port of Durban containers, Port of Richards Bay coal and so forth. But now you have manganese going to the Eastern Cape. We are moving coal away from the Port of Durban to Richards Bay. Then you want to say you are allowing the private sector, you are giving those lots to run the rail network to the private sector. But when you ask yourself, what is it that the private sector is going to do to make that port profitable, that rail network to that line profitable, that we are not able to do as Transnet? Is there a will to make the necessary changes to make the port, the line profitable under Transnet? Or we just want to allow the private sector to do what we know what needs to be done, but we are just not doing it for some reason? I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Lamini. Honorable Kashalia.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the previous year's smoke and mirrors profit due to property re-evaluation has now been wiped out by this year's loss. And all the talk that we had in the past from everybody about green shoots patently doesn't exist. There are no green shoots, there are only weeds. The company clearly needs cash from refinancing, but delayed financial statements, covenant breaches, the negative sentiment and audit qualifications will make this unlikely. This is against the background of only 25% of targets in general being met, and material misstatements in operational performance, in the operational performance report, as pointed out by the AG. The fact is that the company can't service its debt because there is not sufficient, they don't have sufficient interest cover. Now, who is going to pick up here, the buck here, and how? This while, and I must point this out, this while the rail and port collapse in our country cost South Africa 1 billion rands a day, according to the respected gain group. If you look at the major part of the business and look at slide 26, if you like, costs are up, but volumes are down. How? Volumes are falling faster than revenue. Why? Is this due to tariff increases? And how is this sustainable? At current trends, when do you expect the first year of operating losses? Because that's coming. I'd like to know when. Now, you don't have to read between the lines because it's staring you in the face. You had a phase of volumes and revenue and profit increases. Then you had a phase of lack of growth. And now you have a phase of total decline. So who's to blame? Now, I don't say this lightly because this blame and understanding what's happened is an important component of oversight, which is what we are doing. And I don't really care to hear about exogenous challenges. We want endogenous solutions that produce results, as the Honorable Dlamini referred to. Management and policy and oversight that was less than stringent is clearly to blame. And that sits with the DPE, with Transnet, with this committee, and with the minister, clearly. Now we have changed the board and demanded a turnaround plan in 3 weeks. Well, we've heard this kind of thing before. I will say the board looks better than it has for a while. So let's wait and see again what will happen. I hope it's a significant improvement because we need to fix this mess. Where are the skilled staff going to come from, the ones that we got rid of? You've consistently failed in the past to do a number of things. Now, how are we going to get more trains or get more running, from where and at what cost? There's refurbishment and maintenance that needs to be done. Where is this going to take place? How is it going to take place? And with what money? Because there doesn't seem to be enough of that to do this, or to do all of this. It's spent in other areas, clearly. It's all very well to talk about a radical plan, but does this mean, as I've asked, another bailout? You know, is there a comprehensive privatization project prefaced by the third-party operators, which is being embarked on, in tandem with an integrated security structure to underpin it? If that is going to happen, let's understand when and how, what the timetable is, who are the people going to be involved, and how we're going to deal with this, because this is untenable, and we know where the blame lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kachalia. Honorable Mhlongo.
Ngiyabonga, Chair. Chairperson, earlier on when you were dealing with apologies, I want to just start there. I was having a network problem. I just wanted to register the apology of Honorable Mawotwe, who's the main member in this committee. She's not feeling well, Chair. She's sick, so she could not be part of this meeting. Now, my question to the department's chair. Firstly, let us just highlight our utmost disappointment with the fact that we are hearing Transnet now wants to speak the language of privatization, or bringing in the private sector to come and make some of their responsibilities profitable. Chair, we know it, that once you hear the word private sector being brought in relation to our SOEs, we know that that is a recipe for disaster. Things are only going to spiral out of control. We're going to move from bad to worse in order for the entity to become, in order for the idea of privatization to become sellable to the public. The question on the long-standing locomotives, Chair. What is the financial bearing on keeping these locomotives that are standing parked and idling? And when the locomotives were procured, was it not foreseen that they will need to be maintained and repairs? As we know that all assets need maintenance and repairs. So if they were, what was the strategy put in place to ensure that they are efficiently kept going instead of parked and idling? Chair, on the issue of irregular expenditure, the status demonstrates that the progress in relation to the investigation and determination of irregular expenditure. Chair, would like to welcome this, but we can't welcome it because there's still irregular expenditure and fruitless expenditure. We'll only welcome it when it reaches 0% or 0 rands. What is the root cause of this irregular expenditure? And based on this report, you are saying that irregular expenditure is a repeat of non-compliance from the previous year. What was the controls that were implemented to treat this irregular expenditure that keep repeating themselves? The word repeat tells us that your previous controls are not working. Did you review and strengthen them in order to ensure that there's no fruitless and wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure? We are saying that this is the fruitless and wasteful expenditure is due to inadequate internal control. What are you doing to strengthen your controls to make sure that you maintain and reduce this to 0? And has there been identified the officials who were responsible for this fruitless and wasteful expenditure? Have they been identified, and has there been consequence management on them? Chair, we must not act blind. Revenue has been declining for Transnet under the misleadership of Minister Godan. Now, what does this mean? We know that Minister Godan has tasked the new board with coming up with a turnaround strategy. I did not hear the presentation on their turnaround strategy for this for Transnet. If the minister really indeed asked them to do the turnaround strategy, why is it not presented to us? And we must make it clear that Minister Godan has been Minister for Transnet since 2018, and he was the one who was responsible for appointing the board 5 years ago in 2018 when he first came into office in this department. So it is really disingenuous and hugely unfair for the minister to try to absolve himself of any responsibility for the company's weak performance. We must know what has the minister done to steer this company, including both the board and the management, in the right direction and provide proper guidance to the board and the management. What steps and interventions has the minister done in the past 5 years, knowing that the company's performance was declining year on year on? We must also highlight, Chair, the fact that Minister Kodan is the one who appointed his friend and comrade, Popo Molefe, to be the chair of Transnet for 5 years, but also appointed Ms. Portia Debbie as the CEO, knowing she has no experience or expertise in running a logistics company. This clearly shows that the minister failed to take the necessary action when the board was operating without adequate skills and expertise for 5 years, which the board did not even have a chartered accountant to oversee the risk and compliance as well as financial transactions. At what point then, Chair, does the minister acknowledge his own failings and shortcomings and agree to the fact that he has failed Transnet as a minister and as a shareholder representation? He can't suddenly, after 5 years, want to take task with the new board. It's too little too late, Chair, if the minister can ask us. The damage has been done and it will take years to repair, not only Transnet, but the country and the economy at large. Is it only fair to point to EXCO but not at the own inadequacies and failings of the minister? We can no longer blame, we must tell the minister that he can no longer blame state capture, which he does at every given opportunity. Whilst he was in charge of this of DPE for the past 5 years, and he had all these SOEs under him, yet they continued to decline. We've had enough, Minister, of this decline and the excuses of state capture. You are in charge for 5 years. Things must begin to change. Lastly, Chair, I want to speak about the issue of systematic underdevelopment. Has this issue been taken up to Cabinet? And what is the long plan term to ensure adequate funding is allocated to Transnet so that we don't have a backlog of repairs and maintenance due to underinvestment in the entity? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mhlongo. Honorable Gumede. Honorable Gumede, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Honorable Gumede. Honorable Piri.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning to your good self. Delegation from Transnet with their group CEO. And also pass my greetings to the executive if they are still in the platform. Chair, mine will be very simple, but I don't know whether am I audible because we have a network challenge in some of our parks. Chair, are you in a position? Oh, thanks.
We hear you.
I'm going to focus on the security, Chair. We've been having a serious challenge in terms of the security system, given that five security service providers were appointed to service Transnet or the TFR in the corridors as part of the outcome-based securities. The solution to combat your crime, your vandalism, and the railway network. I want to check, Chair, how much are the SSPs costing the Transnet, and where those SSPs vetted to avoid the TFR from being exposed to the criminal activities from within its operations. That is my first question. As I proceed further on the same breadth of securities, I wanted to check with Transnet how many former employees of outgoing security service providers were absorbed into these various outcome-based securities workforces. Chair, but in the breadth of questioning the two, I want also to understand from Transnet previously, the Serious Organized Crime Investigation Unit in Mpumalanga, in particular in Gauteng, have been successfully arrested the individuals who were responsible for cable theft and fuel theft. Moreover, the Transnet Security Nav and Command Center has been successful there as a need to appoint a service provider to carry out the outcome. Based on that, Chair, the security solution to combat theft and vandalization of the railway network, mine is that really, are we not having an organized crime within the employees of the Transnet? And what are the terms or whatever that will make us to avoid an organized crime by the employees of Transnet? So, Chair, I only wanted to question based on the issue of organized crime within the organization. Thanks. Let me land there.
Thank you, Honorable Perry. Honorable Isaac.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson, colleagues on the platform. Chairperson, yes, I'll be brief again in the interest of time. The issue of irregular expenditure was already alluded to with some 556 million rand that was lost due to the supply chain issues, which obviously remains very, very problematical at Transnet based on the history. Chairperson, again, the problem is in terms of running a business effectively and profitably. I understand for a parastatal of this nature, due to its history, has been very, very problematic and complicated. But for example, the Marine Services Authority, I mean, if you look at the ship turnaround times, are not very productive at all. This is also forming a part of the core of our business at Transnet. Would like to hear a detailed plan as to how this is going to be addressed. And of course, there's the issue of Transnet Freight Rail, where revenue has been declining, and that has been pointed out quite a few times. And that is obviously as a result of reducing volumes. The rolling stock locomotives that remain dysfunctional. Now, I've seen the plans. We've heard about these plans previously, and as Honorable Tamini alluded to, the last 3-4 years, you read the same plan, but you seem to get not a very productive report 3-4 years down the line, where there has been positive results. The net operating expenses have doubled, and obviously there remain the revenue leakages, which was also alluded to by other colleagues. The issue of cable theft is a problem that too was now alluded to, so I will not be repetitive. I think, Chairperson, the best for me to sum up with is the comment that was made by the Chief Executive, Mr. Ralph Mills. And he very clearly alludes to the fact that the operating cost, as far as operating costs are concerned, now there was an overspend against operating expenditure of some 252 million rand. Now, this is the biggest contributor to the overspend, as he alludes to, was unbudgeted personnel costs. So, I'd like to understand what is the master plan about addressing this unbudgeted expense or under personal costs, because it just sounds like, a municipality that's passing unfunded budgets. I don't know how best to sum this up, but how is this now sustainable, Chairperson? And of course, I think we need to begin to accept in this committee that the sole point is privatization for many, but at the end of the day, from a business point of view, and in terms of what's best in the interest of South Africa as a whole, there is no question about it that private-public partnership will be the only way to go. So, Chairperson, yeah, I'll just rest my case there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Isaac. Honorable Siweya.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to my colleagues in the Portfolio Committee. Also, greetings to the delegation from Transnet and everybody in the platform. My only concern, Chair, is that I am not sure whether the delegation from Transnet, starting with their CEO, in their own conviction, are convinced that the presentation that they have given us will truly transform and assist the entity to be profitable and functional. I'm saying this, Chair, because I'm not getting a sense that there's conviction on their part. The other issue is that the presentation in other instances, I kept on trying to look. There's an open-ended commitment then speaking that this will be done in time no later than sooner. And I'm a Christian. Sometimes when a person says time less than sooner, it's in the pipeline, what has been procured, I start getting a sense that probably they are coming here to just report. And I want to appeal to them, Chair, that let's take our country serious and let's take our people serious. We truly need to see some change in Transnet. It can't be that boards are changed and so on, but there is no fear that you are taking money to China. What is truly intended as an outcome. I'm also requesting that I think the last presentation or the second before last was talking about the wage bill which is there in the institution. Now trains are not moving. Are you saying to us, the people, for example, I want to use it as a layman, who were supposed to be moving them from one point to another and other functionalities of moving the trains, they are in the pool somewhere doing nothing, or you have redirected their functionality, or they are earning without doing anything because you're complaining about a high wage bill. Can you please take us through the high wage bill, but the locomotives are not moving? What happened to the people who were driving them? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Siweya. Honorable Gumede.
Thank you very much. Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hey, today has not been my day. You know, I've been trying to connect and the laptop kicks me out. But Chair, I wish to agree with you in the sense that the report, especially the late coming of the report, whilst it is a little bit complicated, I wish to suggest that it in fact be accompanied by a narrative version, as well as, yes, we agree Transnet is very much complicated. In its perhaps being complicated, it will be better for us that we are given the information that will better understand, so that the things that are happening, we truly understand them. If we are honest, Transnet should in fact be forming one of the pillars for the DPE. And we don't want a situation where we get threatened by the fact that it may as well be privatized, or some elements of privatization then begin to kick in. It will be bad, especially if it happens during our times. I think it's all of us we are to fight. It may not only be for officials to look for that, but only if officials are giving us the right information and all the weaknesses that they have, other than for us to begin to suspect things that we may not be perhaps suspecting. Chair, I have noted here, but I'll note these things. The issue of floods, which in fact one would have been interested to know how far perhaps is the entity in addressing the KZN floods. A lot has been said on locomotives. I just want to note that. But one other thing is, I think, which has been addressed by Honorable Mhlongo, as well as Honorable Dlamini, which in fact he went into details about it. Apart from how much we are losing for having these locomotives idling, but how much we would have gained if all of them were in fact in operation. That is the main concern that one would have, especially when we talk Transnet. They seem to have gone deeper into debts in the sense that at times they have not honored some of the repayments. One would be interested as well to give perhaps a little bit of an answer on how they think we can recover from the repayments of the debt that we have. I have, Chair, as well noted the 5.7 billion as a loss. This, in fact, is very much interesting. You know, the report, it gives that in 2021, 78 million was in fact a loss. But somewhere in September 2022, we had 159 million as a profit. But in March 2023, all of a sudden, we have 5.7 billion as a net loss. You know, I'm a little bit worried because it's true that in 6 months you come from September 22 to 31st or whatever, March 2023. It's a period of 6 months. So these things, and you are losing 5.7. Where is the biggest impact that in fact caused us to lose 5.7? One will be interested to know, Chair. Operating expenditure, it has as well gone up to 45.9 billion. Where is the biggest impact? What has changed in terms of the expenditure that has cost us that much? Chair, yes, there was an explanation in terms of security provided, as well as the report last time did give an issue that there are attempts to try and do away with theft and vandalism. In light of the challenges that we have as Transnet, will perhaps the payments, because I'm interested to know how much are we losing into or paying the security services, and are we in a position to sustain those payments that we are giving to security services. And Chair, here the TFR is in fact in terms of revenue is declining very much, and we seem to be losing customers and the market shares. What are we doing? What steps we are taking, in fact, to begin to build up confidence and regain those customers that, in fact, we seem to be losing? Chair, there is a lot that, in fact, we are hoping to gain from Transnet. So it will be better that whatever we do, if it need be, Chair, so that no one will ever complain that we are not giving them sufficient time. We need, I know that we, in fact, have a latitude to decide on the dates, times, and venues where we can meet. If we need extra time at the request of Transnet, if there are tangible things that in fact they may want to give us, because confining ourselves to a bit of time that is not enough to probe some of these things may not be good. So, Chair, I'll wait there for now, but there is a lot that in fact is at stake with Transnet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kumede. Honorable Graham Mare, I hope I'm pronouncing you correct. Honorable Graham Mare. Okay, she is not there. Honorable Malinga.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to yourself, members of the Portfolio Committee, the Department, Transnet Board, and everybody on the call. Chairperson, let me first welcome the very, very lengthy presentation, Chair, which is a duplication from, as Honorable Dlamini says, actually they are saying one and the very same thing. It's just in different ways, Chair. Chair, most of the questions that I wanted to pose have been posed by the colleagues, but Chair, I only have a few that I would want the department or Transnet to zoom into. Chairperson, the high levels of debt in Transnet and consequently high levels of repayment obligations, which are not partially serviced in the financial year under review, Chair. What are the strategies of Transnet to ensure that its current bleak financial position does not disincentivize private partnerships and collaboration as outlined in its growth and renewable strategy? The second one, Chair, considering Transnet's high levels of debt and net loss trajectory in the past 3 financial years, how does Transnet plan to ensure a reduction in its high debt levels? Lastly, Chair, a number of loans require Transnet to maintain its CIC, which is a cash interest cover, Chair. Each financial year that Transnet breaches its CIC loan covenant, how will they deal with that one, Chair? And on the 11 loans which total to 52.4 billion in September 2022, how many CIC loans have or covenants were breached as of 31st March 2023? And did Transnet receive required waivers from the affected lenders, Chair? I'll stop there for now, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Malinga. Let me again try Honorable Graham for the last time. Graham Mare or Me.
Thank you, Chairperson. No, it's Maria, so you had it right the first time.
Okay.
Chairperson, I am, as you know, new to the portfolio, and I'm not really in a position to interrogate the information at this stage. So I think most of what I would have asked has been covered. So thank you very much for the opportunity, but I will waive the opportunity this time.
Thank you, Honorable. Honorable Mkhwanazi.
Thanks, Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Greetings to you, Chairperson, honorable members, Transnet team. Firstly, Chairperson, for me, is the apology that we first received by board members that are not present in the meeting. Especially, Chairperson, because the meeting is virtual. I'm trying to get the importance of this meeting to come and listen and report to the portfolio, especially the issues at hand and the priority of this meeting by members of the board. I'm really trying to figure out, Chairperson, to say, is it what they are apologizing for? It's more important than to come to this meeting that happens once maybe a month or in a while for them. But we'll pass that, Chair, because maybe when we're receiving that apology, we did not talk on it, but I'm just noting it. Secondly, Chair, for me, I want to check whether do we have a DPE representative in this meeting because of the responsibility that besides the executive from the DPE, because of the responsibility that they have over to play oversight over the SOCs for Transnet. So if they are here, what is their take in this matter? Chairperson, I've been fairly covered by colleagues at length. Honorable members that talked before me. But I'm very interested on the issue of the costs.
Honorable Mkhwanazi. Honorable Mkhwanazi.
Chair.
Yeah, I think we are losing you.
Am I audible? I've tried to move places.
Yes, you are audible now.
Thank you. I don't know where did I stop or did you lose me, but security and matters and service providers, honorable periods covered me. But as I said, I've been fairly covered by honorable members. I won't repeat the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhwanazi. I think we exhausted the list of the members. We will have to take this back to Transnet to respond to those issues. But before that, the chair of the board, in his introduction, he has referred to issues that are beyond the board's control, that they think they will need our help there. I would like perhaps if he has any example of issues such as that where we will be needed to assist that are beyond their control, what might be those issues? That is the chair. Secondly, I think we have a responsibility to do oversight on Transnet as a public entity. Now, when it is the right time to inform us as the portfolio committee on the move to give over to private sector a particular service or a certain portion of the entity. When does Transnet think that yes, we will do this, and then when they think that now is a time to inform the portfolio committee? Is it when you already executed and pronounced on that particular decision, or when you are still considering to do that? I think that, to me, is a very important question that I need to be helped with by Transnet, because it's very difficult to hear on a serious decision taken on public media before you actually get it from Transnet as this committee, you know. While I fully agree with the Honorable Isaac about the public-private partnership in order to achieve efficiency of our state-owned entities. However, the wholesale of an entity, Honorable, is a serious problem to us, because our role is not to oversight a private entity, is to do this oversight on an entity that is owned by citizens of this country. Our role as a legislative arm of the state is to oversight a Transnet that is still owned by the state. It's not a question of perhaps not necessarily having a problem with the private partnership. That it's not an issue. Transnet and all these entities have a lot of private players in them. In fact, they're open, they are assisting us even in a transformation of the ownership patterns of the state. And it's not a big deal. But our problem is when we see a decision that seeks to take a very powerful part of the state to the private sector, and then we have a problem then. Because our role here, we are not just here to oversight as OE that is in transition to private ownership. No, we are looking at the public interest here. I think as members of this portfolio committee, we have to understand that it's our role. I just wanted to ask that question, Group CEO, whether when do you think is the right time to inform us about these problems? Thank you. Let's give to you, Minister. I don't know whether you will be starting, or the Deputy Minister. I understand the Deputy Minister is also present here. I'm sorry that I could not acknowledge your presence at the beginning. I've just seen while already the meeting was ongoing.
So, Chair, I've been listening in while I have been in the other meeting. So if I can respond to some of the issues that I'm familiar with, and then the Chair and CEO will respond to the others. I think you make an important point in terms of what oversight means. But as I understand it, I think what we need to clarify with the committee is the ideal is where Transnet is a completely competent organization as far as the logistics system that is under its control is properly attended to. And we know that Transnet falls short of that objective. So this is a process of reconstructing Transnet on the one hand, but I think the fair point is that from all the presentations made to you over the last 3 or 4 years, we need to extract for the committee a coherent, and this is something that the board is also looking at, a coherent strategic direction that Transnet is taking, which you can then engage with and establish the validity of. So I think, as I said at the beginning, we need to give Transnet an opportunity to, and the board, to do some work on some of these matters, as was indicated last week, and then bring in people like yourselves in Parliament, but other stakeholders as well. The second point we need to emphasize is that, as you correctly point out, there is nothing in the strategic direction that we are currently approving as far as Transnet is concerned, which amounts to Transnet, inverted commas, being sold, or Transnet being privatized. But at the same time, it is very clear in the state as a whole, let alone Transnet, that recapitalization from the fiscus is something that is going to be extremely difficult, given the levels of economic growth and the fiscal position, on which matter the Minister of Finance has been in the news over the last few days. So we've got to then ask the second question, which is something that the board is also looking at, and we'll come back to you, is, given the financial constraints, which of those constraints can be removed by better operations, and through those operations earning more revenue as far as Transnet is concerned. Secondly, what kind of partnerships are on the one hand in the public interest, but secondly is also going to advance the rehabilitation, if you like, of Transnet. And thirdly, ensure that in each of those partnerships, public interest, as you pointed out and others have pointed out, is maintained and safeguarded as well. The issues of procurement, the executive can deal with. The new board will ensure that there's proper oversight and reporting and transparency in that particular regard. So you will see improvements in that direction as well. And arising from the Auditor General's observations in the last audit report, clearly there are areas where controls need to be either put in place or strengthened. And that will be a matter that both as a department and as the board, we will ensure is taken care of as well. There was reference made to, and snide remarks, unfortunately, Chairperson, about friends being appointed and so on. The appointment process in government is quite a rigorous one, and there will be even further improvements as we implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. So whether it's the chair or the board, there are processes that we actually follow and will be further reinforced, as I said, as we go forward. The chief executive of SOEs is nominated normally by the board itself, and ultimately the government makes a choice in that particular regard. So in these respects, Chairperson, there are proper processes in government, and as I say, these I'm just sort of keeping an eye on the other meeting as well, so my apologies for that. These are processes that will be further strengthened in time in implementing the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. On the issue of strategic vision and so on, as I pointed out, the board will be reviewing that, and will in the next month or so be in a position to comment on aspects of that vision. But secondly, clearly we pointed out in our commentary last week that the area of operations is in desperate need of very meticulous attention by all of us, in particular the executive and the 50,000 staff of Transnet, so that the levels of efficiency are improved and a better service is actually provided to the various stakeholders that Transnet has to actually deal with. As I pointed out, once we have gone through the processes with the board in terms of, on the one hand, strategic direction, but on the other hand, the financial viability of Transnet as we go forward, and which is going to go through a difficult patch. And there's dialogues that are taking place with some members, for example, of the Presidential SOE Council, and within the board and management as well, as to how do we mobilize funds for investment purposes, so that some of the infrastructure issues can receive attention. And I'm sure the executive will point some of those out. And look at some creative ways, like the setting up of the infrastructure agency or entity, which is another way of raising the stakes as far as mobilizing funds is concerned as well. So in sum, Chairperson, as I make my contribution to the conclusions, I think Transnet has entered a new era. We are at the early stages of that. We understand that there are various areas that need to be clarified and made more coherent and more transparent. And I can assure you that both from a DPE and from a board point of view, these will receive the necessary attention. And in the next 4 to 6 weeks, some of the issues can then be canvassed with yourselves. So thank you very much for your patience with my coming in and out of this meeting. And hopefully some of my responses have helped to clarify some of the matters. Thank you very much.
I thought, CEO, we are coming in.
Yes, Honourable Chair, thank you very much. So we'll follow up on the answers that have been provided by the Minister. So starting with the questions that were raised by Honourable Dlamini. First of all, with regards to CRRC, we need to be able, or should I say eLoco, which is the company that's in South Africa, we need to be able to pay them for the services that they provide. And when we make the payments, we need to ensure that there isn't forfeiture of the cash that's within their accounts. In as far as the relationships and the engagements with SARS are concerned, unfortunately, we can't really provide more detail than what we've provided, because it is a private relationship between the taxpayer and SARS. But it was just to give a sense of color on how far we are with working with them. Indeed, honourable members, it does sound like we are being a broken record. In fact, if you look at our annual financial statements from 2021, the presentation that we made, you look at last 21-22, and you look at this year's 22-23 as well. The one theme that stays is the locomotives. So to understand, to explain to the honourable member, the question that was asked, I can't quite remember if it was honourable CEO or Kumeto or later, but apologies, but it was one of the questions that asked, what then happens to these locals? Do we not use them for anything else? Or are they just, well, a long-standing local, it's just standing. We can't use it. It requires a part, it requires a component, and until it is fixed, it can be used. So yes, indeed, quite correct. It is an asset which we bought using debt that we are unable to use, so it's not able to generate a revenue so that it can pay for itself. Hence, us going on about long-standing locals is that we need to find a solution for those. Have we found a solution for the long-standing locals? Indeed, yes. And we have found a solution for at least Webtech, which is the General Electric, former General Electric, as well as Alstom or BT, Bombardier. What remains to be sorted out, as was indicated by the CEO, was the Mitsui locals, which run on the North Corridor, where Mitsui decided not to participate in the procurement event. And we've been able to get Toshiba, who was the 80% component supplier. In the case of CRRC, it's the closure on all of the issues that we've been raising. And having indicated in November last year, we had arrived at a definitive settlement agreement with them. So both the delivery of long-standing locals, as well as the delivery of parts, we've agreed the agreement with them, as well as the new locals that were supposed to supply, that's all agreed to. Once we're able to deal, once these two remaining matters are dealt with, we effectively have an agreement, and so the long-standing locals would be dealt with. Why was there a problem with long-standing locals? Because of two instruction notes. It's the instruction note 3 of 2016-17, paragraph number 11, which said that you cannot undertake a procurement without a full budget. And you're well aware of the financial situation of Transnet, because if I may remind members, we went through COVID, we had the looting, we had the hacking, we had the floods, and we had the strike. All of those things would have impacted on the revenue that we had. And right too that the members are raising this question is what happened to your operating costs? Indeed, over 50% of our operating costs are people related. What we have done, we have taken the cost of retaining the people whilst we were trying to push hard to get the locomotives on track and get those available. So what happened? And so we can only repeat the same problem until it gets solved. And so on the 18th of August this year, we got a letter from Treasury that said for the first time we can go ahead and undertake procurements where we would be raising money in the market. On the 14th of May 2023, we had approached the board of Transnet then and said, we can't continue like this, something has to be done. Now, what are we also trying to deal with is the issue of irregular expenditure. Because if we undertake the procurement without having gotten approval from Treasury, we'd be running into irregular expenditure, which leads to its own issues on the other side. So that's number one on the locomotives. Number two, we indicated as we run out of cash, we are not having enough money to invest in the track, to ensure that the track is at the quality and at the state that it's able to run all of the locals at the right speed without creating derailments and the backlog that we've indicated already. I also indicated to the honourable members that work is being done to quantify exactly what is required and what we will be prioritizing. We have numbers which we've presented to government before, which shows the 5-year investment that's required, and we are still working on that. And hopefully between the regulatory model or whatever, we should be able to get to a sense where at least, and it's a regulatory model that we're banking on, get to full cost recovery so that the track can be maintained. 3, We've been showing what's been happening to vandalism as well as cable theft, and the significant increase that we've had over the last couple of years. When did it get out of hand? It got out of hand during COVID, when systems were closed, and also in the places where we were worst affected, which is in the Central Rand area. It's on the container corridor, where what happened at about the same time, around 2019-20, and members may have better memory on this, when the security services that were providing protection for PRASA were taken away, that made the situation worse. We've raised that before. We have been and talking to government and working with the police services on that side. Now we finally have programs which are reaching traction, and we're starting to see an improvement. Starting to see an improvement, though, doesn't say that it is completely dealt with. As far as Transnet, what are the changes that we made? If you recall, the security contract was one of the contracts that was irregular and had been irregular for many years. We issued a new tender, which was a tender to bring in outcomes-based security into the system. So I don't want to preach. I want to go to the point that the suggestion that we are just repeating ourselves is not, we would wish that we weren't. We would wish that these problems had been solved and we had been able to move on and look at other things. So getting on CNR, indeed, as the honorable member indicates, we are not taking any more locals in their case, and that's a process that we deal with between our chief legal officer as well as the SIU. I'm not quite sure what the question was being asked about SA Express. I would leave it as that, as an attack, but which is entirely unfair, because all of us work in state-owned enterprises for all kinds of reasons. I don't think that's fair. And I think the right to reply should be available to everyone. On the issue of private sector participation, I think the minister has answered, but I also think the question that the Honourable Chair raises, I think is important, that there needs to be a discussion around when then does the committee, as the oversight body, gets informed. We will comply with whatever is required. Manganese continues to go through Saldanha, and the plan is to build the manganese terminal in Gqeberha, in Ngqura, as soon as the approvals, and that's in the process for approvals. We've moved manganese through to East London simply to deal with the current crisis and to ensure that the manganese customers are fully covered and we're able to meet the service divide on that side, the service that they require. On the container corridor, we made a presentation and indicated that we had been losing money over a period just in excess of 10 years. We've lost 19 billion rand because it's a system that moves grain, autos, and sometimes some timber and agricultural products and other agricultural products, which do not pay the full cost of providing the service. So all that's happened with this is that we've eventually gone and said, we've got to cut this loss, because continuing with that loss would have meant that we continue to cause a general bleed throughout Transnet. Our ideal would have been to get a subsidy from government to fix up the track, get the slot to the design slot, which is 47 one way, 47 the other way, and if necessary, sell access to third parties on the system. But we are where we're at, and so that's the reason why we're proceeding in the way that we are. In terms of looking for a partner who will invest in the track and upgrade it, but also keep it as an open access system. And incidentally, at some point in the future, also we would be able to also participate. So we're not exiting it permanently, but we're exiting right now because we just don't have the wherewithal to be able to fund the work that needs to be done on that network. I want to go to this issue of property valuations that Mr. Kachalia raised, Honorable Kachalia raised, which was raised even last year. Indeed, we did the property revaluation, and indeed, when he made his comments, they were exactly the comments that he made this time around. But we held to the line that for us, as investment properties, getting them properly valued would mean that when we started transacting with them, either in partnerships or we were selling, we would get what was a fair price for Transnet. So I'll give you, in 2021, the valuation of the property portfolio was 5.9 billion. In 2022, 6.5 billion. And in 2023, 8.8 billion. And we continue to make sure that its value improves. So whoever comes in and partners with us, we optimize the value for Transnet. Indeed, in our minds, there definitely are green shoots. If you would have noted the presentation that Nongululego made, 4 of the operating divisions, at least 3 are definitely profitable. Transnet Properties is around the corner. You will recall it is a new operating division in Transnet. 2 areas where we continue to bleed very badly is Transnet Freight Rail and it's Transnet Engineering. And both, there's a lot of work that we're doing to ensure that we recast its cost structure and to ensure that they achieve profitability. In TFR, we've already, you know exactly the things that we are going to target. I'll leave some of the cost issues to Nonkululeko to deal with, but Nonkululeko, I just want to run through the others so that you come in at in one point. I think I've tried to indicate the issue, and Minister, I think in part has answered the question around private sector participation. For us, it's not privatization. We've kept on saying in every single transaction, we remain as the partner and the player. That's not privatization. We are partnering with them to grow the enterprise, even in the case of ICTSI, which is the Philippines partner who's coming into DCT Pier 2. It's a partnership directly with them. Slindile will answer the questions about the internal control environment and fruitless and wasteful. But I also want to go back and remind honorable members, when I was indicating the work that we're doing around automation, what automation will do, it will improve efficiencies, first of all. It will secondly also ensure that the control environment is significantly enhanced so that these things of irregular expenditure would be substantially reduced. Secondly, we are working on creating a product catalog so that there is standard pricing. Also on this issue, going out in a fully automated procurement process was not possible without getting some resolution on some of these instruction notes, because what these instruction notes are, if they were not changed, would mean that we would have to build a complicated automation system which takes all of these factors into account, 3 committees and the rest and the like. So now that we've got permission to automate fully, we will automate fully and then be able to have a system that can be audited directly. Security at Transnet for the whole group, it's 1.7 billion rand. In terms of the employees that were absorbed by the new companies, and Honourable Member Phiri, indeed, what often happens is that when there's a change in contract, 2 things happen. First, your incidents, security incidents go up, but then secondly, the members who were in the previous company often get absorbed into the other. In this time around, what happened is that it wasn't automatic. They first had to do a check, a probity check on the individuals. And in certain instances, they did find members who had criminal records, and so they did not employ them. And we also made sure to check with the security registration, the regulator of security practitioners, to ensure that the people were people that had no criminal records and the rest. So that caused some tension because the usual did not happen. And then lastly, Honourable Member, all of the companies were vetted by SSA and they were cleared as companies that we can work with. Ashwin will probably come back on this issue of serious and organised crime and indicates the work that we do with the police force. On the STS, I thought Jabu should respond to just indicate how they are performing. But I just thought, and Honourable Chair, maybe this is one of those issues that does require a follow-up discussion so that we talk about actually what happens at the port. Because one of the things that we've asked our Chief of Strategy with the CEO of TNPA is to work with the World Bank on then what would be a definition or a measure for ship turnaround, because that's about efficiency of the whole system, the marine services as well as the terminal operators. In the case of Durban, where a vessel comes into the port, goes to one terminal, offloads some of its cargo, leaves that terminal, goes to another one in the terminal, maybe offloads other or goes for maintenance. All of that time is inside, and so would increase the time that it took inside the port. So we've got a team that's reviewing how we would then measure all of those things so that we can have comparable data going forward. And in terms of debt, just to indicate that we always pay our debt. We have never not honored any of our debt repayments. And I suppose in some ways, the fact that we prioritize repaying debt, and I think you would have heard the chair of Transnet indicating how much we pay as debt interest on a monthly basis, we then make sure that we have covered those obligations. Having covered those obligations, it then creates an issue when we have to then redistribute the cash that we have available to ensure that we cover all of our operating costs in the organization. Nonkululeko will come back and indicate where are the causes of the loss, just some of the numbers that make up the 5.7 million rand. I think I'll pause here. Sorry, with Honorable Mkhwanazi, I didn't get all of the questions. I'll look at them. In the meantime, Nonkululeko, can you deal with what are your questions? You can deal with the fruitless and wasteful expenditure as well, or we ask between Slindile and Vule to come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. Portia, you've touched on the issue of the payment of our debt. We have never defaulted indeed. All due and payable debt that is maturing, we've paid on time. We continue to plan to do that in the coming periods. The other question I would just like to touch on, Chairperson, is on the issue of the financial statements. I think a point was made that it is qualified. It is not qualified, Chairperson. On the financial statements, we received an unqualified report from the Auditor General of South Africa. The matters that were raised around the shareholder compact are outside the financial statements, are reported in the director's report, which is included as the broader report for the financial year. So the financial statements are not qualified. Then there was a question, Chairperson, around the contributors to the cost that increased. We moved from a 45 billion rands to a 45.9 billion rands in terms of operating expenditure. And I can confirm, Chairperson, that from the personnel cost, we saw a reduction. In the year 2022, the personnel cost contributed about 58% to our expenditure. In the year 2023, personnel costs contributed 54%. That was a reduction of about 1.5 billion rands in that regard. Where we saw increase in expenditure, Chairperson, was in maintenance cost, which is a critical element of expenditure as we want to ensure that the assets are renewed and catered for. And I think a discussion here has confirmed that it's not nearly enough for what is required, but that is where the significant increase in cost focused on. The second element that was an increase related to electricity-related costs as well as fuel. And what we have seen in the current year was increases in prices in this regard, both from the electricity costs as well as the fuel expenditure that we needed for the business. And then the third element is around security costs. And again, the discussion here around the challenges we are experiencing with theft and vandalism of our assets require that we continue to spend to protect the assets so that we can continue to move volumes. And then the other point made, Chair, was around the rating agencies. We have continuous engagements with rating agencies. They would come and do a full review at least once a year of Transnet, which they will probably have to do now that the results have been done, and we will be working with them in this regard. But in terms of the work we were doing with them in the past year, one of their significant responsibilities is to confirm to the lenders that Transnet is not going to default on the funding that they've given us. And as we were working through the maturity of $1 billion, they stayed very close to that process. It was after we had dealt with the $1 billion maturity that they came back to us in around February, March, and confirmed the rating of Transnet at that point in time. But as I indicate, they continue to work with us in the periods in the future periods. So we will continue to hear from them. And then the question around the change in the numbers from 159 million at half year to 5.7 billion in the year end. Every month, Chair, we do closing of the system and we have to report exactly what would have happened in that period. One of the elements that we have to assess is the value of our assets at any point in time. And where there are challenges or risk of impairment, we have to build that as we close the financial year. So if we look at the 5.7 billion versus what we reported at half year, because of the challenges of the standing locals and the Transnet freight rail, and again, the big numbers in the negative have come from the challenges around the availability of locomotives. We had to assess the standing locals for the additional impairment requirements, and that contributed quite significantly to the loss position that we reported compared to where we were at half year. It's an assessment that we have to do at any reporting period. But secondly, as indicated, the challenges around the volumes reducing, which would have been a particular number at half year, and the 149 million tons that we have reported at year end. I think I have covered most of the financial related questions, and I think the debt matters have been covered by Portia. I will not repeat that. Well, the last one is around the cash interest cover breach. There was a question around how much was breached and how many facilities were impacted. Chairperson, we had 32 billion rands that was impacted, and it related to about 10 facilities. As indicated, we've worked with the funders concerned, and they have given us waiver in relation to their rights, and the matter has therefore been cleared, and the facilities are then back to being the long-term facilities that they are at this point in time, and the breach has then been cleared based on them giving us the waiver on the breaches. I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Chair, I'm worried about the time that's left over. Slindile, can you just briefly come in? And Honourable Chair, the issue that was raised by Honourable Gumede about providing some sort of a write-up with the presentation is noted. We will do our best to help with some notes as we put together the presentations. But Honourable Chair, we need to keep communicating around how we can ensure that as Transnet, because as a group, there are a lot of companies, and we end up in the situation where we end today, where we've not covered pipelines as well as Transnet properties, is how we might be able to find a way to cover all of the areas. But the request is noted, and the challenge we will take up to ensure that we make sure that the information is readily available. And Honourable Chair, I need to apologise for the lateness of the presentation. The only decision that we were trying to make was we knew we could have sent it on time, but we would have then be giving you last year's figures. We knew that we were issuing the final financial statements between the 31st and the 1st. And so it wouldn't have, to our mind, looked right to come to the committee and talk as if those results are not there and ignore them. So apologies that we took that upon ourselves, but in future, we'll definitely make sure that you get things on time. I don't know if we've still got time for Slindile to answer on the irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful, Chair.
Hi.
Sorry, I was speaking while I'm muted. I'm trying to say you are left with 2 minutes now, but you can continue until at least 10 past.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Chair, can I just ask Slindile to come in, and then we'll leave you to close the session.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Slindile, can you please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, honourable members. Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, Minister and the Transnet executives. My name is Silindile Gubega. I'm the Loss Control Officer, and my main responsibility is in the reporting of the irregular expenditure, as was requested by the honourable members in terms of the root causes. Those ones mainly emanate from the internal controls with the supply chain. Highlighted this year, the 556, the majority of it, about 79% of it, is coming from the floods-related emergency spend. If the honourable members will compare last year and this year, we had about over 1 billion of irregular expenditure due to the internal controls that Nonkululeko was talking about that we have implementing and we continue to implement. We have half that expenditure. Indeed, we would like to see it reducing to non-material levels. And I'm carefully mentioning non-material levels, Chair, because we don't want to give an impression that in an organization like Transnet, we may have zero irregular expenditure due to the nature of it. And also of all the irregular expenditure incurred, there have been issues that are highlighted and transferred to the forensics unit, but no fraud is identified. The irregular is mainly because of non-compliances that have been identified with either the PPR or the procurement regulations of 2017, mainly though they were related to the National Treasury instructions on the emergency, that the approval was not reported on time after the emergency spend had occurred, Chair. So what we have implemented, there's quite a number of reforms that the supply chain, the group CPO has put in place, which includes also the automation of the tender processes. If you look at the categories of what made up the irregular expenditure, Chair, in the past, there were over 5 categories, including non-compliance with the CIDB, non-compliance with a number of legislation. This year, it's mainly the 2 categories, as highlighted the regulations of 2017, as well as on the emergency spend. We continue, Chair, even if you were to look at the 2023 audit report, AGSA's report on consequence management in the past, because of the work that has been done in the consequence management space, we have reduced. Last year, they had, even the prior years, they had reported on number of transgressions from Transnet. This year, there's only 1 paragraph that they've included, which means we did not take action on time, and we continue to improve on that, being supported by our internal audit and the forensics unit. I would like to pause there, Chair and our CEO. If there's additional questions, I would be more than happy to also provide written responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silindile. Honorable Chair and honorable members. I wanted just to take this opportunity to respond to some of the questions that were posed. The first question that was posed was the mandate of the board. I want to preface that question and say that we, as a new board, we would be completing month 2 on the 11th of September, which is next Monday. And we have been able to bucket the issues into what we believe are issues that can be controlled internally within the company. And the issue of operational improvements and efficiencies is one of those. And certainly that would form a significant component of the turnaround plan that we are busy with, which would go to the board and then to the minister, and would certainly be willing and available to apprise the committee of that plan. Part of that plan also, we would look into the issues that members have raised, honorable members, around cost containment and how best to ensure that we can improve volume and improve efficiencies. Having said that, we also have looked at the situation and have come to a conclusion that we will not be able to do that without having to inject more money into the business. So, I want to talk more specifically about some issues in that regard under the area of operational improvements, or the stuff that is within the domain of the executives or the company. The first one is the issue of the maintenance backlog. This is something that we have not spoken about. There's a new board that has come in. It has been brought to our attention that there is a maintenance backlog of 50 billion rand, which needs to be funded. And the company does not have the resources to fund that. So we will have to look at measures in terms of how we can get the cash, access to cash to do that. The reality is that the company is overstretched in terms of its ability to raise cash. As I had reported in the financial presentation last week, we are paying about 1 billion rand in terms of interest debt service cost a month. So over a 12-month period, we pay about 12 billion rand. And we have reached the limit of our gearing capacity. Despite the fact that we need cash, we do not have a strong balance sheet to be able to generate more cash. Hence, part of the turnaround plan would be to investigate the possibility either of disposing of some of our assets so that we can be able to raise cash, or looking at ways in which we can inject capital. The conundrum is what the minister has already said, that the national fiscus does not have the capacity to do that. So what we are observing as a new board is that there are a lot of things that need to be done, but the company is not resourced adequately with financial capital to be able to deliver on that mandate. There are many reasons for that. And hence we cannot divorce the fact that the remnants of state capture still live with us even today. Because our debt profile has ballooned from about 60, 70 billion rand 7 years ago to about 130 billion rand. And we do not have the corresponding asset in our balance sheet that will give the company an opportunity to generate revenues and be able to afford the maintenance backlog due to many years of under-servicing and under-maintenance. This is the context in which we would like to appreciate the work of the board and the work of the executive. Having said that, we're still determined to put together a credible turnaround plan to turn things around. But there are significant constraints and headwinds that we are facing. And the many years of under-maintenance of the track is one of the contributors to the track that keeps on breaking, resulting in derailments. Let us put that aside for a while. The chairperson asked specifically what are the areas that we would need assistance on. The issue of security, it cannot be handled by Transnet alone. We will certainly need the reinforcement of the police force and many other agencies, because this is a national issue. As you can imagine, that we have rail networks all over the country. We have the support of the private sector, having invested in drones and many other capacities that we require, but it is not enough. So we would certainly need cooperation in that regard. The other issue is that of the delay in the resolution of the CRRC locals. Every day that goes by without this matter being resolved, it is costing the country. It is costing us in terms of the revenue opportunities where we could have put those locals back on the track so that we can start generating revenues. So indeed, we are committed, and we will certainly engage with the committee in terms of our work and our determination, but it would be very remiss of us to say that we do have all the tools and all the apparatus available at our disposal to be able to do our work. There are issues that are really restraining us in terms of our ability to do that. So wherever possible, if we could gain assistance to try and unlock some of those bottlenecks. Having said that, there are issues that internally we will need to push so that as a board we can deliver on the mandate and hold the team accountable for results. So there's a duality in the role where we ask support from the shareholders, from the committee itself. Having said that, we are very mindful and committed to doing what is within our power to make sure that the resources that are in our disposals are efficiently allocated. The teams are made to account properly for their work, reduce costs, deliver results. But to try and build sufficient and sustainable momentum, it's going to need more than that. Chair, thanks very much for indulging us. And I also want to appreciate the opportunity to come and address the committee. And we are hoping that we'll have another time, hopefully more time, where we can delve far more deeper into these issues so that we can begin to turn the organization around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson of the Board of Transnet. Honorable members, I think we have reached the end of our meeting with particularly the part with the Transnet. I will want to take this opportunity to thank the Minister and all his entourage, including the Chairperson and the Board, the Executive and the entire leadership of Transnet for their willingness to engage with us, and we hope we'll be seeing them soon in order to go back to those issues that still need some further engagement. On this note, we will release them and the members will remain behind so that we conclude the meeting. Can we release a board of Transnet? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Honourable members, we would like to check if there are the minutes of the previous meeting, or what is it, Mr. Bashum?
No, Chair, we have not tabled anything for this meeting, Chair.
Then we reach the end of the session. Honourable members, thank you very much for your participation and attendance to this meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.